What's up YouTube? This is Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change the washer drum bearings in a Kenmore Elite Oasis. Can you hear that? Okay, so you just heard how loud this washer is when it's going through the spin cycle. That's an indication that the bearings are completely bad. They're completely worn out and making lots of noise. So we're going to get those changed out and I'll show you how to do it. The first thing you need to do is unplug the washer. I'm going to see if I can perform this repair without disconnecting the water lines on the back here or the drain pipe here. I've pulled the drain pipe out a little bit and pulled the washer back from the wall to give me a little bit of room to work and to tilt this lid up. I'm also going to need to tilt the washer back. I think I might have enough room to do that without disconnecting the hoses, but we'll find out. I've just grabbed a couple pieces of tape here, and I'm just going to tape the lid here to this top section of the washer. That will keep this from trying to open when I lift it up down here. Now this next step, you grab a stiff putty knife and come over here to the front. I don't know if you can see it in there, but there's it's a little metal clip that if you squeeze it down or push it in with this putty knife, that will allow the lid to lift up. So I may need to set the camera down in order to do this, but sometimes if you come in here at an angle, you can find where it is and put the pressure on it. There it is right there. There we go. Okay, now the lid's popped up, and then you should be able to lift it, and that's what those little springs look like. This is that little metal tab that you're pushing in with the putty knife. Now I've just got this lid propped up with a little rope with these little hooks on the end. It's from an old bungee cord that was rotten, so bungee cord or something would work fine, and the idea is you just want to have that up out of the way so you can access the inside of the washer. Okay, so now up here in the middle, there's different models have different designs of agitators, but this is just this top piece that separates right here, and it just kind of snaps into place. So we can take that off, set that aside. Now this piece right here also just comes out. It's got this little rubber O-ring around there. Of course, we'll probably clean that up, but that can be set aside for right now. This next part of the agitator is held in place by a little bolt down there. I don't know if you can see that. So grab a 7/16 socket and a few extensions, and we can break that loose and take this piece out. So see, the drum kind of turns, so you kind of just need to hit it once to break it loose. Okay, and then this part of the agitator will just come out, and we can just go ahead and set that aside. Now we can take out the bottom part of the agitator. Sometimes you just got to wiggle that a little bit, and we can also set that one aside. Now this next piece here, it's held in place by these 6 Phillips head screws. We can just loosen and remove those. It helps to have a magnetic tip, that way you don't lose them down into the lower drum. And then we can just take off this plastic piece right here, and then this lower part will also just slide up these splines here. Now take note, this has got some washers on here, or a steel washer. Don't lose that. Make sure that that comes off with that and keep it together. Now we can take off this little hose in the back. Just got a little hose clamp here. Alright. Then we can take off this upper cover piece, and of course we'll get this all cleaned up and looking nice. This has just got these little clips around the edge. You can kind of do this by hand, just kind of go around. There's 2 on each end. It's got snaps here at the corner too. Okay, once you have all those unsnapped, you can just take off this top trim piece. So sometimes the drum will just lift off the shaft, but in this case it's stuck on there pretty good. You don't want to yank up on this plastic upper ring either. There are a couple tricks, and you could put a jack on there with a wood piece of 2x4 on the inside here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the lid back down, and we're going to tilt the dryer back on its back and access the bottom so that we can disconnect the shaft from the motor assembly, which we need to do anyways to access those lower bearings. So I'm going to go ahead and just disconnect this, and I'm going to set the lid back down. Okay, now I've got the dryer propped up on its back, kind of leaning up against the wall. Just make sure that it's not going to slip or fall on you while you're doing this. But you can see down here, this in the center of this plastic piece, this is actually a part of the motor. This is screwed into the main axle shaft, or the main drive shaft of this washer. So we can loosen and remove this. It's a 1/4 inch Allen key, and you'll notice this one's actually kind of loose. Before I've even started to loosen it, it's probably vibrated loose a little bit, but we'll go ahead and back that off completely. And then we can just drop down this piece, kind of just wiggle it gently side to side. Okay. And of course that's got all the magnets and everything. That's part of the motor, but we can set that out of the way. Now, in order to get access to be able to loosen this nut, we're going to go ahead and take off these 4 little bolts that hold on that other part of the motor. And those are 5/16. Alright, now we can carefully pull down this part of the motor here. And that's still connected. This plastic trim piece kind of just falls down out of the way, and we'll just set that out of the way for right now. Now, since I'm going to have to set the dryer back down, I've actually decided just to go ahead and disconnect this. So this is just it's like 3 tabs right here that plugs right into that part of the motor. And we'll just set that over here out of the way. Now, to remove this shaft, I mean, you could use a large socket, but crescent wrench is fine. And that's all it took. It actually came off fairly easy. I should be able to drop this back down now and remove the drum, and the shaft should come out with it at the same time. Okay, so we can carefully lower this back down. Okay. Now we can set that down. Okay, now that we have the whole drum out with the shaft, I'm just going to use a long dowel here and tap that axle all the way through. Okay, then we can just pull this shaft out the rest of the way. Okay, so we got our the old shaft out, and we'll get that cleaned up. A lot of kits come with a new one. In this case, I am going to have to reuse this. I just ordered the bearings, but that's okay. We'll get this squared away. Now, obviously, since we have the drum out, it's a great time to come in here with a 1/4 inch nut driver. Pull off this cover. It's just a little filter screen in here. And you can see it's got lots of junk in there, so we're going to get that washed out before we put it back in. Also got a few little plastic things in here. Clean enough, we can put that back on. Alright, now we're ready to tap out the lower bearing, and I'm just going to use this little metal drift and give it a pound. And you can hear that dropped out the bottom of the washer with the inner sleeve and the inner washer as well. Now we're going to go ahead and have to lift the washer up once again so that we can tap out this upper bearing. It's much easier to do from below. There, the top one is out. Now we're going to go ahead and put the bottom bearing in since we're down here. Just going to clean this off a little bit. Just kind of wipe out the inside of this part here. So you start with this sleeve right here and just kind of hold that in there with one hand, and then this little washer goes in next, and then our bearing. Just try to line that up, and you can kind of get it started by hand, at least kind of pushed in there just a little bit to catch that edge. Now I do not have the special tool which pulls these two bearings together, so I'm just going to do them one at a time, a little bit more of a old school way. Just going to tap that in with a socket. So I've just found a socket that kind of matches up to the size of that, and I'm just going to tap that in gently, just as straight as possible. That little washer in here is not perfectly centered, but it feels like you can move. Okay, yeah, I was able to kind of just put this end of the socket in and kind of move it around and center it. Okay, now that that's seated, and just verify that it still spins correctly, and it's of course not crooked or anything. And then of course our sleeve and washer in here are still kind of loose because we don't have our upper bearing on, but we'll go ahead and do that now. And here's the old bearing that we popped out, and I can feel that that's really rough, and of course compared to the new one, which is nice and smooth. So we can go ahead and set that in place down here. With this upper bearing, I actually didn't have a socket that matched the outside diameter, and I didn't want to tap it in on the inner sidewall of that bearing. Now I realized I could just use the old bearing and just stack that, but I found this machined piece that I happen to have. It's actually for a swimming pool fitting, but it ended up being the correct diameter. So I'm just going to set that in there and tap that in. Now this is also not ideal because the washer tub is still under suspension, and I'm hoping that we can get this in. I can see now how that tool, that specialty tool that's sold, would be very handy for this, but I'm going to give it a shot here. Okay, that feels like it might have worked. And the bearing still spins properly. And there's no movement on that inner sleeve. So we're fully seated. Actually wasn't that bad, and got lucky with this little machine tool. You might have a socket that will fit that outer diameter. I used a 36 millimeter for the bottom one, which worked fine. But if you had one maybe a little bit bigger for this upper one, that would be fine too. Or just the specialty tool. Alright, now we can put the drive shaft back in. One thing I did want to note is that I had a hard time pounding this out of the drum because there was a lot of corrosion right here on this shoulder. I ended up sanding it off with some emery cloth, and I test fitted it, and it'll work. But if I were to do this over, I probably would just replace this. It's of course all kind of pitted and corroded pretty bad. I didn't realize that this one would be this bad. I have done this on another washer, and we did replace it, but I don't remember it being this bad. But in this case, all I did was order the bearings. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back together. We can just drop that back in, and that'll sit right on top of those bearings. Okay, now we can put that nut back on. Just make sure you don't cross thread that. Alright, now to tighten this, of course you don't want to grab a hold of that spline or that shaft, so I'm just going to hold on to the end of it with some channel locks like this, and just put the crescent wrench here on the nut and see if I can't just give that a few turns. Okay. That's about how tight it was. You don't want it too tight because then it won't spin. This piece right here, this white piece, just connects to these 3 tabs. That's quite simple, just like that. Now this piece, it's like a position sensor. Okay, so it goes right there. You can see there's 2 arrows, one on this black thing, one on this other part of the motor, and this snaps in just like that. Okay, we just had to slide that in, and then it clips right here and on the other side as well, and that's in and ready to go. Before we put it up, we got to put this little gray trim piece up here. We've got another arrow here and then an arrow on the bottom of the washer tub, so you can see where that lines up. And then this should just lift up where we had it. Now that gray piece just wants to fall right back down. Once we get it at least centered and started, we'll be okay. I meant to wipe this out earlier. It's got a bunch of this grease. It looks like it kind of leaked out. And then this is this little circle retainer. Just get these all started by hand. Just kind of want to make sure that that's fully seated, and that looks good. And just make sure all your cables are out of the way and these are snapped back into place. And then we can put this last piece on here. And just kind of carefully line that up. And then once you have it started, you can thread the bottom piece in. Just want to make sure that that's not bound up or anything. Okay, now we can put the seal up on the top of the drive shaft. This little opening goes down, but before we put it in, you want to get a lot of grease packed into these ridges on the inside. And this grease came with the kit. It's like a high temp grease. It's a little bit different than the stuff I've used in the past, but just going to put a nice even bead all the way around the inside of this seal. Pretty thick bead. And then what I'm going to do is try to use my finger to force that into the grooves on the inside. Same thing on this side here. Now again, I know this looks different than what you probably have seen or even what you may have got in your kit. This is the kind of grease that I've used before in a similar kit, but these bearings came with this stuff here. It looks a little bit different. It's supposed to work better. So we'll see. Now with the grease on the inside, we can put a little bead of this adhesive along the outside, and you really only need to go along this lower edge here. Just a small amount really is all it needs just to get it started, and this stuff's real sticky, so be careful. And then we can just kind of lower this down in place over the shaft, and that grease will kind of come out a little bit, and that's okay. And just press that seal in there. Now a lot of the kits have a little tool, a little piece of pipe to go over that to tap it in. I just happen to have a piece of pipe that will fit on that. In order to tap it down, I've got another socket here because the piece of pipe wasn't long enough, and just kind of center that and tap it into place till it seats. And it should just be flush. Now after we have the seal pressed down, just want to get some more of that adhesive along the top of the seal, and this time we can do a good amount. just over all the way around that edge out to the end, and this will prevent leaks. Okay, and then we can put the drum back in and just carefully position that just like that over the shaft. And then we can put on this this little collar right here with just make sure that those stainless steel washers or washer is still in there. And then our piece on the outside, just to line up these holes, you may have to turn it once or twice until those line up. And then we can get our screws started. Just be careful not to drop these because they'll drop into the outer tub and you'll have to take the drum back off to get them. Just kind of alternate on the back and forth. Get those tightened down. Okay, then we can put in the lower part of the agitator. Just line that up with splines and it'll just slide on down. And then the next piece, which has this bolt in the bottom, same thing, just line that up and it'll drop in place like that. Okay, then we can just tighten up that bolt down there. I'm just going to kind of kick this once, twice, just to make sure that that's nice and snug. And then this piece here just snaps into place. And then lastly, our little top cap here, like so. Then we can put our top piece back on. Actually going to put the hose on here first, just to make sure that we're all lined up. Just press that on. Use some pliers here to pull that clamp back on. And we'll push that down and out of the way like it was. And then just go around and snap this into place. 1, 2, and then each corner also has one. If we just line up these tabs, they should just snap down. Put the top back down the last time, and as you push it down, there's these 2 bolts here and 2 holes up here. You just want to go slow and make sure that those are lined up, and then it'll just press down into place. Now we can take the tape off the lid here, but we can't test run it until that sealant has a chance to cure. The instructions say to wait about 24 hours. We'll come back tomorrow and give it a test run. But that's all for right now. Alright, so it's the next day. We're back here. I'm just going to plug the washer in to test it. I'm just going to do a quick drain and spin just to run it through a little test. And it's just going to put a little bit of water in there and then spin around here in a minute. Spinning up to speed. Looks like it's actually still getting faster, but big difference in the noise. You might want to run a full test load with some detergent to clean out some of that grease and debris from working on the washer tub. One thing I failed to mention or failed to show is there's a small weep hole in that drum, and it's a good idea to clean that out as well. You can just use a small screwdriver to clean that out. There's a few other videos on YouTube that show how to do it, and I failed to show that, but make sure that you check underneath and around the washer for leaks. I will put a link in the description to the parts used in the video, along with a link to the entire kit that has the drive shaft and the other tools and pieces and whatnot. Hope you like the video. Give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.